Alice sat at the kitchen table, the sunlight bleeding through the window, casting long shadows across the worn wood. The letter lay in front of her, its edges curled, the seal broken. It wasn't the first time it had come. But today, it felt heavier. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. She tried to steady her breathing, but the smell of dust and stale air in the room only made her feel trapped. She could almost feel the weight of the years pressing in on her, like a hand around her throat. She unfolded the paper. The ink on the page was dark, sharp. The words pierced her thoughts, sliced through the calm she had managed to build over the years. Her eyes scanned the lines, again and again, but it didn't change. She was still reading the same damn thing. You owe him. The words seared her skin. The debt. The name. A man she tried to forget. The price she'd paid to rid herself of what haunted her, to bury what she couldn't keep. Her hand gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. The twins. The adoption. She'd done it, hadn't she? She had sent them off. Sold them. For what? For a life she could never give them. For a life she could never have. The letter didn't say much. Just enough to remind her that the past was still chasing her. That the things she'd buried never stayed buried. That man, that sheriff, still had a hold on her, even from miles away. She was still under his thumb. Her heart thudded in her chest as she let the letter fall onto the table. Her breath was uneven now, shaking. The boy. Her thoughts snapped back to him. She couldn't ignore the feeling in her gut. Not now. There was a knock at the door. Alice didn't move. The knock came again, louder this time. She stood slowly, every bone in her body creaking. She wanted to ignore it. She wanted to stay locked inside her skin, to stay still. But she couldn't. She couldn't hide from this. Not anymore. She reached the door, hands shaking as she gripped the handle. When she opened it, there he was. The boy. He was thin, too thin, like someone who had been carried too far without stopping. His clothes were worn, patched in places. His hair hung like it hadn't been cut in months. His face was pale, his eyes wide, but it was the way he looked at her, like he knew her. "Mama," the boy said, his voice hoarse, almost pleading. Alice's heart stopped. Her mouth went dry. She didn't know him. Or maybe she did. Maybe he was one of the ones she had given up. She stared at him. His eyes. There was something in them. Something familiar, something that made her stomach twist in a way she hadn't felt in years. Something that shouldn't be there. "What did you say?" Her voice came out hoarse, too. Like she had forgotten how to speak. "Mama." He stepped forward, just a little. "Please. You have to take me in." His eyes, so desperate, so full of something she couldn't place, made her take a half step back. Her mind was spinning. She was drowning in memories, in faces, in names she couldn't remember. Her breath was shallow. Her throat burned. She shook her head, though it felt like it was being pulled somewhere else. Somewhere she didn't want to go. "I don't." "I know you," he said quickly, almost like he was trying to convince himself as much as her. I'm one of them. The twins. I remember you." His voice cracked. You sold us. But I remember you." A chill ran down Alice's spine. Her knees felt weak. The letter. The boy. Her heart stuttered. Her mind screamed at her to shut the door, to forget him, to go back to what was safe. But her feet stayed rooted to the ground. "I don't know you," she whispered, her words lost in the wind. Her mind couldn't catch up to the truth of it. Couldn't process the weight of what was happening. He stepped closer, the desperation rising in his chest. His voice cracked again. "You sold me. You sold me, just like you sold them. But I remember you." He reached out, and his hand was trembling as it hovered between them. "Please. I remember you. Alice's chest tightened. She looked at his face again, the face of a boy who was not a stranger, but not the child she had abandoned either. A boy who had been lost. A boy who had been forgotten. Her hand shook as she reached out, barely brushing his arm. It felt like a ghost. A memory. Something she had buried long ago, something she had hoped would never find her. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. His eyes filled with something else now. Something softer. I just need a place. I need somewhere to go. Please." Her throat closed up, the weight of the years pushing down on her chest. Her hands were shaking too badly now, and she couldn't stop them. She tried to speak, to say something, but her voice wouldn't come. The boy was still standing there. Waiting. Silent. His eyes wide and full of hope, full of pain. Alice closed her eyes. The world spun. It felt like the house was closing in around her. The walls seemed too small, too tight. She wanted to tell him to leave. She wanted to tell him she couldn't help him. But she didn't. She opened her eyes, and the boy was still there. Still waiting. "I'll take you in," she said finally, her voice low, the words tasting like rust on her tongue. The boy's face cracked into something like relief, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. And Alice couldn't help but wonder if she had just made a deal with something far darker than she had ever imagined. Alice sat across the table from Jacob, watching him. His eyes never left hers, not once. He sat too still, like a wild animal trying not to be noticed, but she saw the tension in his posture, in the way his hands twisted in his lap. He was waiting for something. For her to remember him, maybe. But Alice didn't. Not yet. She couldn't. "I don't know you," she said, her voice quieter than she wanted it to be. He shook his head. His face, pale as it was, seemed to soften a little. "You do, Mama. You do. I've always remembered you." His voice cracked on the word Mama, and Alice flinched, the sound hitting her like a slap. She gritted her teeth, trying to shut it out, trying to lock it away. "No, you don't. I've never seen you before. You must be mistaken." His eyes didn't waver. "I'm not mistaken. I'm Jacob. I'm one of the ones you gave away. One of the twins." A knot tightened in Alice's chest. The twins. She felt a wave of nausea hit her. She couldn't do this. She couldn't think about it. Not after all these years. She had buried it so deep, so far down, that even a whisper of it made her feel like she was suffocating. "I didn't," her voice wavered, but she swallowed hard, pressing on. "I didn't give you away. I didn't." Jacob didn't let her finish. "You did. You sold me. Just like you sold them." His words cut through the room, each one like a knife twisting deeper. "You sold me and then you forgot me, didn't you?" His gaze held hers with the intensity of someone who knew something she didn't. Something that made her skin crawl. His eyes were old, full of things a child should never carry. I don't remember you," Alice said again, this time with less conviction. She didn't want to hear this. Didn't want to face the truth of it. Her hands were shaking as she gripped the edge of the table. He leaned forward, and for the first time, his voice softened. "I was just a boy. Just a little boy. You left me in that place, Mama. I remember you. I remember your face. I waited for you to come back, but you never did." Alice's heart slammed against her ribs. His words felt like fire on her skin. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the image of the boy he described, the small, trembling figure in her memory. The one she had walked away from. But she couldn't. She couldn't forget. Her mind flashed to a moment from the past, long buried, a snapshot of a boy with wide, scared eyes. The boy she had given up. Hadn't she? Hadn't she walked away from him just like she had walked away from her own children? Her throat closed up. She was suffocating. "Please, Mama," Jacob whispered. His voice trembled. "I need you. I just need a place. I just need somewhere safe." Alice pushed her chair back and stood quickly, her breath coming fast. "No. I can't do this." Her voice cracked, and Jacob's face tightened, as if he could see right through her. "You did it before, didn't you? You took the money. You gave me away, just like you did to them." "No," Alice said again, shaking her head, though the lie tasted sour in her mouth. She wanted to scream, to tell him it wasn't true, but something inside her broke when she saw the raw fear in his eyes. Something inside her cracked wide open. "I remember you," Jacob repeated, quieter this time, his words a soft plea. "You looked at me, and then you turned away. You didn't even say goodbye." She closed her eyes and felt her chest tighten with a cold pressure, as though the walls around her were closing in. His voice kept echoing, over and over. "You didn't even say goodbye." The room felt too small. The air too thick. The house, the kitchen, everything she had tried to ignore for so long, felt alive with memories she had buried under layers of silence. She had locked them all away, but Jacob was breaking that lock, one word at a time. "Why are you doing this?" Alice finally asked, her voice strained, desperate to push him away. She backed up a few steps, away from the table, away from him. "Why come here now?" "I need to know why," Jacob said. "I need to know why you did it. Why you sold me." His eyes were wide with something darker now. Desperation? Anger? She couldn't tell. "I need to know why you forgot me." Alice turned away from him, her hands gripping the back of a chair so hard her fingers ached. She couldn't look at him. Not anymore. Her breath came fast, shallow. She felt like the room was spinning. "I didn't forget you," she said quietly, so quietly she almost didn't hear her own voice. "I didn't forget any of you. But I had no choice." Jacob didn't say anything. She could feel his gaze on her back, like a weight pressing down on her. Her head was spinning. "I thought I was saving you," Alice muttered, almost to herself. She didn't mean to say it out loud, but she couldn't stop. "I thought I was saving you from something worse." She heard him move behind her. What could be worse than being abandoned? Being forgotten? Alice squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the pain, the shame. But it was impossible. She had done it. She had walked away from them. From Jacob. From her twins. She had sold them, and now they were ghosts haunting her every move. "I didn't know what else to do," she whispered. Jacob's voice cracked again, like glass shattering. "You could have kept us. You could have loved us." Alice shook her head, her body shaking now, from fear, from guilt, from something she couldn't name. "I couldn't. I wasn't. I wasn't enough." Jacob's voice was soft, but full of a sorrow she couldn't escape. "You were everything we needed." And Alice realized, as the weight of his words sank in, that she had made a choice long ago. A choice that would never let her go. Alice sat on the edge of the bed, her fingers tight around the worn sheet, as Jacob's breathing slowed beside her. It was late, and the house felt colder than it had in years. She could hear the wind pushing against the window, the old house creaking in the night, but all she could think about was what Jacob had said. "They just wanted you." His words had echoed in her mind all evening, pulling at her like an invisible thread. She couldn't shake the feeling that something inside her was unraveling. The weight of her past, of what she'd done, sat on her chest like a rock. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw their faces, her twins, their eyes wide with fear, their tiny hands reaching for her as she walked away. The guilt washed over her, each wave heavier than the last. That night, the dreams came again. In the darkness, she stood in the old house, the one she'd left behind, and the twins were there. Their faces were twisted, not with anger, but with something worse, confusion. The room felt suffocating, like she was trapped in a memory that would never let her go. They reached out to her, but no matter how hard she tried to move, she couldn't get to them. Their voices screamed for her, but her feet were cemented to the floor. "Mama," they cried, but she couldn't move, couldn't reach them. And then, just as they vanished, a shadow appeared in the doorway, blocking the light. The sheriff's face. The man who had taken them. Alice jolted awake, her heart hammering in her chest. She sat up in bed, gasping for air, as if she had been running. The room was still, silent, but her skin felt cold, as though the nightmare hadn't ended. She could still feel them, her twins lingering in the space around her, their voices haunting her, demanding answers she didn't know how to give. She didn't know how much time had passed before she climbed out of bed, her legs unsteady as she walked to the attic. The house felt strange, like it was alive in ways it hadn't been before, as if it were watching her every move. The attic was dark, but Alice knew where to go. The old boxes were stacked in the far corner, dust collecting on them like time itself had forgotten them. She reached for the first one, her fingers brushing against the cracked wood. It had been years since she'd opened any of these. Years since she had dared to look. But tonight, she couldn't help it. She had to see. She had to find something to explain it all. The lid creaked as she opened the box. Inside, there were papers, old receipts, letters, legal documents, but it was the photographs that caught her eye. She pulled them out carefully, as if touching them too roughly might cause them to disintegrate. There, in the first photo, was her daughter, smiling. And beside her, her son, his face just as innocent. Their faces were frozen in time, the same faces she hadn't seen in years, the same faces she had left behind. The photo was from the day she had sent them away. The day she made the deal. Her stomach twisted. She flipped through the rest of the photographs, her hands trembling. There was the day they had been taken. The day she had told herself it was for the best. A picture of the twins standing beside a man, an older man in his sheriff's uniform. His smile was tight, and his eyes glinted with something cold, something she had tried to forget. The truth hit her like a punch to the gut. The sheriff had been there, all alone, pulling the strings. He had made the deal. He had been the one to take her children. But Alice had agreed. She had signed the papers, handed them over. The weight of the betrayal sank deeper, suffocating her. She had traded her own children for a price. A lie that they would be better off, that they would have a life she couldn't give them. A rich family, a life in a better town. All of it. She had done it. And for what? A life that would never be hers. A life that had destroyed her, piece by piece. Why did you do it? Jacob's voice cut through her thoughts, and Alice spun around, startled. He was standing in the doorway, his face shadowed in the dim light. His eyes were wide, full of questions, full of something else. Something she didn't know how to answer. "I thought I was saving them," Alice whispered, her voice hollow. She didn't know why she said it, but the words slipped out before she could stop them. "I thought I was giving them a better life. I thought it was the only way." Jacob took a step forward, his expression darkening. "That's not the truth, is it?" The question hit her harder than anything else. Alice couldn't meet his gaze. "I was desperate. I had nothing. I thought if I gave them away, they would have something I couldn't give them. Something better. I thought they'd be happier." Jacob's voice was soft but firm. "You lied to yourself. You lied to them." Alice's throat tightened, and the air felt thin. "I didn't lie. I didn't know what else to do. I was drowning, Jacob. Drowning. And I didn't think I had a choice." Jacob's eyes were full of sorrow, but there was something else there, too. "They didn't want better. They just wanted you." The words cut through her like a blade. She stumbled backward, her hand pressed against her chest as though she could stop her heart from breaking. The weight of it all was too much. The guilt, the shame, the betrayal. She had sold them. She had sold her children. "I couldn't keep them," Alice whispered, her voice breaking. "I couldn't keep them." Jacob didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The truth was there, hanging between them, heavy and suffocating. Alice sank to her knees, the photograph slipping from her hands as she let the darkness take her. She was lost, consumed by the weight of what she had done. "I couldn't keep them," she repeated, the words barely audible now. The room seemed to close in around her, and she felt the weight of her past crushing her chest, suffocating her. There was no escape. Not now. Not ever. Alice stood in front of the sheriff's office, her hands shaking as she gripped the door handle. Her chest was tight, her mind racing with 1,000 questions she couldn't form. Every step toward this building felt like she was walking toward something darker, something she couldn't escape. The door creaked open, and the stale air of the office hit her, a mix of dust, leather, and old paper. She stepped inside, and her eyes immediately landed on him. Sheriff Grant was behind his desk, his wide, knowing smile almost too perfect. It didn't reach his eyes. His gaze was cold, calculating, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. "Alice," he said, his voice smooth, almost too smooth. "It's been a long time." She didn't respond at first. She just stared at him, every ounce of hatred she had built up over the years flooding her chest. He hadn't changed. His uniform, the badge on his chest, all of it felt like a weight pressing on her lungs. He had been the one to take them. He had been the one to take everything. "You know why I'm here," Alice said, her voice low, but steady. She had to control herself, had to make him listen. "I want to know what happened to my children. The twins." The sheriff's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. "Your children," he repeated, as if savoring the words. "They're in good hands, Alice. You don't need to worry about them anymore." Alice's blood ran cold. He was playing games. He always had. She could see it now, the way he used his words, his influence. "Don't lie to me. I want the truth. What happened to them?" The sheriff leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. His eyes never left her face. "The truth," he mused, tapping his fingers together. "The truth is, you did what needed to be done. You gave them up. And I made sure they were well taken care of. A good family, plenty of money, a life better than what you could have given them." He paused, watching her carefully. "I did you a favor." Her stomach turned. "A favor," she spat. "You took them from me. You sold them." He shrugged. "That's one way to look at it. I prefer to think of it as helping people. You were in a bad place, Alice. You couldn't keep them. I offered a way out." Alice's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "You think you're some kind of savior, don't you? You think you did me a favor?" The sheriff's expression didn't change. He didn't even blink. "I gave you what you wanted, Alice. What you needed. I didn't force you. You made the choice." A bitter laugh escaped Alice's lips. "I didn't have a choice." He tilted his head slightly, as if he were considering her words. "That's where you're wrong. You always had a choice." He leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. "But you took the easy way out. You gave them to me. Just like so many others have." Alice's mind reeled, his words hitting her like a sledgehammer. "What do you mean, so many others?" She took a step forward, her eyes narrowing. "How many, Grant? How many others have you done this to? How many mothers have you ruined?" He leaned back in his chair again, his fingers still steepled in front of him. "I run a business, Alice. A very successful one. You weren't the only one in need of a solution. There are a lot of desperate people out there, people like you." His eyes gleamed as he continued, "I provide a service. Parents who can't keep their children, people who want to start over. I connect the dots. It's all part of the game." Alice felt the world shift beneath her feet. It wasn't just her children. It wasn't just her pain. The sheriff wasn't some one-off monster, he was a machine, a system. He had control over everything. Over the town. Over her. And the worst part was, she had willingly handed her children over, thinking it was the only way out. She took another step toward him, her voice shaking now. "You've ruined lives. My life. You've taken everything from me." The sheriff didn't flinch. "Everything?" he repeated, his tone soft, almost patronizing. "You've got it wrong, Alice. I gave you everything. I made sure your children were well cared for. I made sure you got what you wanted." "No," Alice whispered, her throat tight. "You didn't give me anything. You took everything." For a moment, there was silence. The weight of his words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Alice's mind raced as she tried to process the truth, the ugly truth that she had never allowed herself to see. She had been just another pawn in his game, just another desperate woman willing to sell her soul for a glimmer of hope. And the worst part? She had been too weak to fight him. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why didn't you let me have them? Why didn't you just leave us alone?" The sheriff smiled, his eyes glinting with something cruel. "You didn't want them, Alice. Not really. You were just too afraid to admit it. I gave them a better life. You should be thanking me." Alice's chest tightened. The room felt smaller, colder. She was suffocating under the weight of it all, the betrayal, the lies, the guilt. She felt as if the walls were closing in on her, trapping her in a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. The door creaked open behind her, and Alice turned sharply. Jacob stood in the doorway, his face pale, his eyes wide. He had heard everything. His voice was shaky, but it carried the weight of something deep and raw. You soulless," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "You sold me. You sold my sister." The sheriff turned slowly, his gaze flicking over to Jacob. "Ah, there you are," he said, his smile returning. It was almost like he had been expecting this. "I wondered when you'd show up." Jacob took a step forward, his fists clenched at his sides. "How could you? How could you do this?" Alice turned toward him, her heart breaking as she saw the raw emotion in his eyes. The child she had abandoned, standing there, facing the monster she had helped create. The sheriff didn't flinch. "Don't blame me, boy. Your mother made the choice. She's the one who gave you up." The words hit Alice like a punch to the gut. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't speak. Everything she had done, everything she had tried to forget, was staring her in the face. Jacob's voice broke through the suffocating silence. "You didn't just take our lives," he said, his voice raw with grief. "You took our futures." And Alice realized, in that moment, that she was never going to escape the nightmare she had created. She had given her children away, but they were still trapped. Trapped in the sheriff's web. And so was she. The cemetery was quiet, too quiet. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the cracked headstones. Alice stood at the edge of the graveyard, her eyes scanning the rows of forgotten names. Her breath was shallow, ragged, as if the air itself was suffocating her. Her feet moved of their own accord, drawn toward the grave. She didn't know why. She didn't know whose grave it was. But something in her body told her it was important, that she needed to be there. Her heart beat faster with each step, her hands trembling at her sides. The wind picked up, brushing against her face, as if it were trying to push her away. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. When she reached the grave, Alice knelt in the dirt. The name was worn, nearly illegible. She ran her fingers over the stone, trying to make sense of it, but the words were a blur. It didn't matter. She didn't need to know whose grave it was. She already knew. The ghosts of her past were here, standing just out of reach. The twins. The sheriff. The children she had sold. Every life she had destroyed, every face she had forgotten, was buried in the earth beneath her. Alice, Jacob's voice broke through her thoughts, soft but insistent. He had been following her, his footsteps quieter than her own, as if he were afraid of disturbing her. We need to leave. We need to get out of here. Alice didn't look up. Her eyes were fixed on the grave, on the empty space between the stones. I can't leave. Not yet. Her voice was barely a whisper, lost in the wind. Please. Jacob's voice cracked with urgency. He was close now, standing behind her. This place, this town, it's eating you alive. It's eating us alive. We can't stay here. The sheriff, he has too much control. It's not safe. Alice's hands dug into the dirt as she clutched the edge of the grave. The ground felt cold, unyielding, like the weight of everything she had done was pressing down on her. I can't run anymore. Not from him. Not from what I've done. Jacob crouched beside her, his hands on her shoulders, trying to turn her toward him. You're not running, Alice. You're escaping. You're not the same person you were when you left them. You're stronger now. But Alice couldn't hear him. Her thoughts were consumed with the past, the decision she had made, the things she had buried so deep that they had festered into a sickness she couldn't shake. She had tried to run, tried to hide from it all, but now, in the quiet of the graveyard, there was nowhere left to go. I didn't know what else to do, she whispered, the words coming out broken, like they were a confession. I didn't know how to keep them. I didn't know how to love them the way they needed. Jacob's hands tightened on her shoulders. His grip was gentle, but firm. You did what you thought was right. But you were wrong. You're not the same anymore. We don't have to keep carrying this, Alice. We don't have to keep living like this. Alice shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I wasn't strong enough, she cried, her voice raw. I wasn't strong enough to keep them. To fight for them. And now it's too late. Her breath came in sharp gasps, as if the weight of her guilt was choking her. She collapsed in the dirt, her body shaking with sobs. The wind howled around them, as if the earth itself was mourning with her. I'm so sorry, she whispered into the night. I'm so sorry. Jacob knelt beside her, pulling her into his arms. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. His embrace was enough. She clung to him, the weight of her past pressing down on her like a storm she couldn't outrun. For a long time, they sat there, the wind tearing through the cemetery, the sound of their breath the only thing that seemed to exist. Alice's sobs slowly faded, but the ache in her chest remained. And then, from somewhere deep in the earth, she heard them. The voices. The whispers. At first, it was nothing but the wind, the rustling of leaves, but then she heard it again. A soft call. A whisper from the past. Mama. The word was a ghost, floating through the air, just out of reach. Alice's heart stopped. She jerked her head up, her eyes wide, searching the shadows, but there was nothing. The wind whipped through the graveyard, the leaves spinning in the air. And for a moment, Alice thought she saw them, her children, their faces pale and twisted, standing just beyond the gravestones. They were there, and they were waiting. Waiting for her. Her breath hitched. No, she whispered, scrambling to her feet. No, it's not real. But the vision was real enough. The children were there, their eyes full of confusion and pain, their hands reaching toward her, their mouths silently calling her name. Jacob stood quickly, grabbing Alice's arm. It's not them. It's the past. It's the ghosts you're carrying. You have to let them go. But Alice couldn't. She couldn't let them go. They were hers. They had always been hers. And no matter how hard she tried to bury them, they would always come back. The ground beneath her feet felt alive with memories, and she was drowning in them. She could feel their hands on her, their voices in her head. They were pulling her under, dragging her down into the earth. She was trapped in the graveyard of her own mistakes. Alice. Jacob's voice broke through her panic. We have to go. We have to leave this place. She shook her head, her body trembling. I can't. I can't leave them. Jacob pulled her closer, his voice firm. You're not leaving them behind. You're carrying them with you. But you can't stay here. Not like this. We have to go. Alice looked at him then, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she saw something in his eyes. Something she hadn't seen in a long time: hope. Slowly, she nodded. Okay. Let's go. And for the first time in years, Alice felt the faintest pull of hope, a glimmer of light in the darkness. She wasn't free yet, but maybe, just maybe, she could start again. With Jacob by her side, they would leave the past behind. And, for the first time, Alice allowed herself to believe that maybe she could still be something more than the woman who had lost everything. Alice sat at the kitchen table, her hands trembling around the edge of the cup in front of her. The room felt too small, the air too thick. Jacob stood by the window, his eyes focused on the street outside, his posture rigid. The weight of silence hung heavy between them. The storm was coming, she could feel it in her bones, the air crackling with a tension that had been building for days. It was a storm she couldn't avoid any longer. Alice, Jacob's voice broke the stillness, soft but firm. He turned from the window, his eyes meeting hers. You have to understand. This isn't just about you. About your choices. It's bigger than that. Alice swallowed hard, her throat dry. What do you mean? Jacob took a step toward her, his expression tight with something she couldn't place: fear, anger, sorrow. My family, we've been cursed, Alice. For generations. The words hit her like a slap, and she felt the room spin for a moment, her mind struggling to make sense of what he was saying. Cursed, she echoed, her voice shaky. He nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. My father, my grandfather, they were part of this, too. They were part of the same cycle, the same damnable cycle of loss and death. The sheriff, he's not just some man with power. He's the one who's been keeping it alive. His influence is just the surface. The real curse runs deeper than that. Alice felt a chill run through her, as though the walls were closing in, suffocating her. She didn't want to hear this. She didn't want to know the truth that Jacob was offering her. What does this have to do with me? She whispered, the words barely leaving her lips. Jacob's voice softened, the rawness of his emotions seeping through his words. You're part of it, Alice. You always have been. Your family, my family, the sheriff's family, it's all tangled up in this web. The cycle of loss. The sale of children. The destruction of lives. Alice stared at him, unable to process. You're telling me that what happened to my twins, what happened to you and me, it wasn't just our choices? No, Jacob said, his voice barely above a whisper. It was a curse. A curse placed on our families long ago. It's been feeding off the pain, the death, the grief, for generations. The sheriff, he's the one who keeps it alive. He controls it. The room seemed to close in on Alice. The walls, the floor, the air, all of it felt suffocating, like the weight of the entire town was pressing down on her. Her breath caught in her throat. How do we stop it? She asked, barely able to force the words out. Jacob's gaze hardened. We confront it. We confront the sheriff, no matter the cost. Before Alice could speak, there was a sharp knock on the door. Both of them froze. Alice's heart skipped a beat. She knew who it was before the sound had even fully registered. The sheriff, Jacob muttered, his eyes narrowing. He's here. Alice stood, her legs shaky beneath her. She had to face him, she knew that now. There was no running, no more hiding. The sheriff had been a part of her life for too long, and it was time to end it. No more. Jacob led Alice to the door. He placed his hand on the knob but hesitated before opening it. Stay strong, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Alice nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but she knew she had no choice. The door creaked open, and there he stood. Sheriff Grant. His uniform was pristine, his smile too wide, too knowing. The look in his eyes was as cold as ever, but there was a crack in his armor. Something flickered beneath the surface. For a moment, it seemed like he wasn't entirely sure of himself. Alice, the sheriff said, his voice smooth as silk, though his eyes betrayed him. Jacob. He nodded toward them, the corner of his mouth twitching as if he were savoring the tension in the air. "What do you want, Grant?" Alice asked, her voice low but steady. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. His smile widened, but there was a sharpness to it now. "I thought we could talk. You've been distant lately." "You've done enough talking," Jacob said, his voice colder than Alice had ever heard it. "We're not running anymore, Sheriff." "Not from you." Grant's eyes flicked to Jacob, his expression faltering just slightly. "You think you're in control here, boy?" His voice dropped, turning dangerous. "You think you can change things? You don't understand the game you're playing. You're nothing but pawns." Alice stepped forward, her chest tightening as the words left her lips. "We're not pawns anymore. We've seen enough. We know what you've been doing. How long this has been going on. How you've been controlling all of us. For how many generations, Sheriff?" Grant's eyes darkened. "You have no idea what you're talking about." But Alice wasn't done. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. You've been feeding on our pain. Our losses. You've made your power off the backs of children. My children. His children. And now we're done. We're breaking the cycle." The sheriff took a step back, his smug demeanor faltering for a moment. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He knew, now. He knew they weren't afraid. And that frightened him more than anything. "You can't break the cycle," he said, his voice low. "It's not something you can escape. It's been going on long before you two were born. You can't change what's already been set in motion." But Alice wasn't listening anymore. She stepped forward, her eyes locked onto his. "I'm done listening to you. You're the one who's been trapped, Grant. Trapped by your own power, your own lies." And with that, Alice took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, she felt something other than fear. She stepped past him, stepping into her own power. The sheriff stumbled backward, his expression shifting from anger to disbelief. "You can't just walk away," he hissed. "You'll regret this." Alice didn't respond. She had no need to. The sheriff had no power over her anymore. He was nothing but a ghost of her past, a man who had fed off the pain of others for too long. And now, the town was waking up. The curse was breaking. Jacob stood beside Alice, his shoulders squared, his gaze steady. "It's over, Sheriff. We're not your pawns anymore." Grant's face twisted with rage, but Alice knew he was powerless. The web he had woven for so long was unraveling before him. As they walked away, Alice felt the weight of a lifetime of mistakes lift from her shoulders, if only slightly. She wasn't free, not yet. But she was stronger than she had ever been. And for the first time, she and Jacob walked away from the ruins, side by side, knowing they would never be the same, but that they had earned the right to live freely. The town was behind them now, fading into the distance like a dream or a nightmare that had lost its grip. Alice didn't look back. She couldn't. The weight of the past, of everything she had left behind, was still there, trailing just behind her, but it no longer held her down. She felt lighter, even though she knew it wasn't gone. It never would be. But she was done carrying it alone. Jacob walked beside her, his steps steady, but his silence filled the space between them. There was no need for words now. They had said everything they needed to say. Every story, every confession, every truth. And now they just walked. One foot in front of the other. The road stretched out before them, the landscape empty but full of possibilities. The air was still, quiet, and the world around them felt untouched, as though it had been waiting for them to leave before it could breathe again. Alice's face was tired, her eyes heavy with the burden of everything she had lived through, but there was something else there now. Something she hadn't seen in herself in years: resolve. She was still scarred, still broken in ways that wouldn't heal, but there was peace in the way she walked now. A peace that had cost her everything. Jacob glanced at her, but she didn't look at him. She didn't need to. She could feel him beside her, steady, unwavering. The connection between them was unspoken but strong, like the earth beneath their feet. They both knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. They didn't know what would come next, didn't know what kind of world they were stepping into, but for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a shadow to run from. It felt like something they could face, together. They passed the edge of the town, the last buildings disappearing behind a rise in the road. Alice felt the tension in her chest slowly ease as the town slipped further into the distance. She had thought she would never leave, that the weight of the sheriff's influence would hold her forever, but now, there was nothing but open space before her. The wind swept across the plains, and the scent of earth and wild grass filled her lungs. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the air like it was new, like it was a part of her now. It felt like freedom. "I used to think I was trapped," Alice said quietly, her voice rough from everything that had been left unsaid, but her words still felt like the truth. "In this town. In my life." Jacob nodded, his eyes forward, his jaw set with a quiet strength. "You were. We both were." They walked in silence for a while, the weight of their shared history settling between them like a quiet understanding. The road ahead was uncertain, but Alice realized that was okay. She had spent too many years worrying about what was behind her. Now, she only had to focus on what was in front of her. The horizon stretched wide, endless, and yet full of possibility. It was something Alice had never dared to imagine. She had always been trapped by the past, by the things she couldn't undo, the mistakes she couldn't take back. But now, with Jacob beside her, there was nothing but space, nothing but the future, one step at a time. Alice reached down, brushing her hand through the tall grass at the side of the road, feeling the softness of it beneath her fingers. She didn't know where they were going. Didn't know if they'd find a place to settle or if they'd keep moving, but it didn't matter. For the first time, Alice felt like she could breathe. And breathing was enough. She heard Jacob take a deep breath beside her, the air filling his lungs the same way it filled hers. She glanced at him, and their eyes met for just a moment, a silent understanding passing between them. They didn't need to say anything. They both knew. They had both fought for this. They had both paid the price. And now, they were free. The land stretched out before them, empty and waiting, and Alice let herself believe, just for a moment, that maybe it was enough. Maybe they didn't need anything else. And as they walked, the road unspooled beneath their feet like a promise, the silence between them not an absence, but a new beginning.